Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Friday, July the 9th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open if anybody's awake and would like to sit in there. I'm just having some coffee and trying to wake up here. Glad it's Friday. It has been an awesome week, though. And I want to continue on talking about this article I found, Dealing with the Effects of Trauma, a Self-Help Guide. This is such an awesome little guide. It's not all that long. It's not a huge workbook or anything like that. It's only about 9 pages. But what they had to say was very awesome regarding the effects of trauma, and then how we can help ourselves, to feel better, right? I love it. It's from SAMHSA's National Mental Health Information Center. And you can get that at http://mentalhealth.samhsa.gov. And we're working on the portion of this article that talks about the healing journey. And if you pull that article up, you can find it on page 7 of this article. And this is the healing journey portion. And we were talking about this yesterday about setting boundaries, learning how to set boundaries, learning how to be good advocates for ourselves. We need to become our best ally, our best advocate to make sure that we get the help that we need. We also talked about the portion that they talked about was building your self-esteem, and we went into that quite a bit, especially for my situation, and what I went through, and developing lists of things that we can do to help ourselves feel better. That was the next portion, and we'll continue on from there. So yeah, I'm glad that you can be here. I just I always let everybody know I'm not a professional counselor. I don't hold any counseling certificates or therapist certificates. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows because I really feel that the issues surrounding child abuse are just not talked about enough. There are people out there talking about it, and I just wanted to be one more voice. But as far as being mainstream, you just don't hear a lot about this stuff out in the mainstream media. And whether it's television, national radio, and whatnot. So I just thought, it really does need to be talked about. We all need to talk about it. The whole issue is it's an epidemic. It's worldwide, and 1 out of 3. This is just for North America. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be abused in some way, under the age of 18, whether it's sexually, physically, verbally, emotionally, so psychologically. We know this is a serious problem, and the only thing we ever hear about it in the news is the headlines, and that's tragic. These horrible, tragic headlines of these children who lose their lives, or end up in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries at the hands of their parents and caregivers. And I thought, nobody's talking about how are we going to prevent child abuse? How are we going to help strengthen families? How are we going to help survivors who have, these children who have been abused? How are we going to help the adult survivors who have, walked this journey for so long and have, so much to say and quite often are silenced? And then when they do have something to say, there's no real outlet for them to say it. And I thought, I'm just one more voice, really, to add to all the others that have really come before us to talk about this stuff, right? It's so important. So, you have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive, and if you have to know what you're comfortable listening to. And I always give the topic and tell people where the resource came from. And it's your discretion. You have to listen at your own discretion. So if it makes you uncomfortable, you have to turn the show off, right? You would not be hurting my feelings at all. So you have to be safe, right? Young people under the age of 18, I really ask that you have some permission, really, from an adult or a caregiver, that you can listen to the show and listen to my shows. They're ultimately about stopping child abuse. As I fight for children's rights, I fight for child rights. I also am working around the clock, really, except for the time that I have to sleep, to save children's lives. And so it's so important that you have someone know what you're doing online, and even for my show, right? That's the whole issue. There's so many, it's insane how many child sexual predators and pedophiles are out there on the line, on the internet, online at any given time, trying to get a hold of children. And this is really a fact. You can find it, some great information on the FBI's website for internet safety for parents and for children. And the FBI, they talk about how many actual predators, child sexual predators and whatnot, are online at any given time, and they said it could, be around 750,000. So, you have to be really careful what you do online. If you're a young person, never give out any personal information. Never tell anybody your real name. Don't use your real name, and don't go into those chat rooms and start telling people what school you go to and what time your parents are home, and don't give out your address, your phone number, no personal information whatsoever. A lot of those predators, they pose as young people in those chat rooms. They'll say that they're 12, 13 years old, that they have a skateboard, that they love to go out and hang out with their friends, and they know all the latest songs and videos and movies that young people are listening to and going to see. And they know all about the young people because they study the whole thing. And then they tell you that they're that age, and then they coerce you to give them information about yourself, or they have you meet them somewhere. And these are actually adult, 20, 30, 40-year-old people, who knows what age they are, who are looking to sexually assault children and get a hold of children, right? Kidnap children, sexually assault them. You have to keep yourself safe, and parents really need to wake up to the fact that this is happening. The FBI and the different groups around the North America are really, and everywhere else in the world too, are really trying to cut these people down fast. You know what I mean? And they're working on it. But the thing is they're still out there. So that's why I just say on my shows, I would appreciate it if you're under the age of 18 that you would have someone know that you're listening to my show and have them listen to it with you to make sure it's something that you should be listening to, right? So we'll get right on with this article. I wanted to look at the next portion of the healing journey from this article regarding dealing with the effects of trauma, a self-help guide. And it's just awesome. As a survivor of child abuse, right, this all makes very much good sense to me because it's exactly, like I understand it, the trauma of child abuse. But this article is good for anyone who's experienced any trauma. And so, life is traumatic, right? It can be. There's always the possibility for trauma in everyone's life. Health issues, job loss, violent crime, natural disasters and things like that. We see these natural disasters happening around the world. Well, those people are traumatized, and they have to deal with the after effects of the trauma. A death in the family, anything like that can cause someone to have to become traumatized, and at that point, it's very, very hard for people to, to feel good, to wake up in the morning to say, I feel comfortable, because trauma is whatever upsets you so deeply. It's something that, if it upsets a person, it can actually upset you physically, as well as psychologically. It can affect people in many different ways. And so, then sometimes people end up with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD and different things like that. And this is just not uncommon, right? So there's ways to handle and deal with trauma. This article actually is so good because it really it helps us to look at our situation and look at ourselves and learn that we can get help and that there is help available, right? And that we need to be our best advocate, to go out and get that help. Well, quite often help will just not land in our laps as much as we'd like it to. It'd be great if you were just sitting there and all of a sudden help just came and knocked on the door and said, hey, I'm here to help you. But that's just not usually the case. And so we have to really be proactive and search out the help that we need, whether it's, counselor, excuse me, my voice is terrible this morning, a counselor, a therapist, a group support, a good friend, someone you trust, that's proven themselves trustworthy. It's just a good idea to have someone to talk to, so that we don't feel alone and so isolated within our traumatic experiences, and cut off from the world. Because really, we're not cut off from the world, right? We can get help, and I've noticed that since I started reaching out, that this is very true. And so that's why I'm doing these shows, right? To encourage people to keep going forward at whatever pace they're comfortable in, to get the help that they need, so that they don't suffer on in silence and suffer on by themselves, just feeling like, wow, is this ever going to get any better? Am I ever going to feel better? And that's the whole issue. That's a question I was asking myself until 3 years ago. And so I know how hard it is, right? The next portion of this article says, every family develops certain patterns or ways of thinking about and doing things, and those things you learn in your family as a child will often influence you as an adult. sometimes making your life more difficult and getting in the way of meeting your personal goals. It says, think about the ways of thinking and doing things that guide you in your life, and ask yourself if they are patterns and if you need to change them to make your life the way you want it to be. For example, it says, in your family, you may have been taught that you never tell anyone certain family secrets. In fact, it may be very important to share some family secrets with trusted friends or healthcare providers. Or you may have been taught that you must always do what certain members of your family want you to do. As an adult, it is important that you figure out for yourself what it is you want to do. In effect, you can become your own loving parent. Now, I really love that because it's so true. Most of the time, I mean, we can't help it. Children are, they grow up in these, being taught and with all these learned behaviors of how to deal with things, how to cope with things. And if you grew up in an abusive home or with a lot of violence around you, or domestic violence and child abuse and whatnot, or even if it was just very neglect, like a lot of neglect, children grow up with, and really behave based on what was going on in their lives when they were young, because the child's brain develops, during this time very fast. And so they're like little sponges that pick up on everything. So a lot of this stuff is learned behaviors. And we could ask ourselves, am I doing some of these just because this is how I grew up handling things? And can I change things that will help myself, to get more out of life, or to really search out my healing? Or that's the whole issue. They said here, many times family members are told not to tell anyone about what happened in their lives, right? Not to talk about family problems and things that are happening within the family. Quite often, my mom used to threaten my life if I told anybody what was going on in our home, because they had already been brought up on child abuse charges and had been court ordered to go to counseling, right? My parents, and they didn't go. They went like a couple of times, and that was it. So the whole issue is they didn't want to get brought up on more charges, right? So, and they would have been. It's unfortunate that we didn't rat them out, because we could have got some help, right? They could have got some help. It's just sad. But the thing is that we know it happens, and so I didn't know if she'd kill me or not. She could have, right? I mean, she's a very powerful woman, had a lot of rage inside of her. So I wouldn't necessarily just tell everyone. I had a family intervened on my behalf when I was 13 and a half, right in there somewhere, and they intervened, and my life actually got somewhat better because of it. And so that's the whole issue. I'm glad that those people did that for me, that family, right? But the thing is quite often that doesn't happen for people. I was not removed from the home or anything, and the abuse still continued, but my mom knew that there was another set of eyes looking in, so she had to kind of control herself and learn, she wasn't any more non-abusive as far as her treatment of me, but she had to kind of cut back on the physical abuse, because those people had said that they were going to the cops the next time they saw any bruises or anything like that on me, or if I went to them and told them, they would report it. So my mom had to kind of calm down and sort of somewhat behave herself. So this is the issue. This happens. But the thing is we're often told not to tell, right? So then as an adult survivor, we just can't hardly get around the fact that, we can get some help, whether it's group support, anonymous group support, joining groups that you don't even have to give your real name. You don't even have to tell them really who you are, or point out the abuser. You just go and sign in to these groups, these child abuse survivor groups, and you can join anonymously, and no one really needs to know your real name. But you can still get some help and talk to people, and I think that is just so important, right? And also, that then we just tend to hold it in. If we've been told, no one needs to know about the family secrets, and you just tend to hold it in and not tell anyone and suffer along in silence. I had told, a few select people in my life, so I did talk to people about it. And growing up, I had lots of friends, especially when I was young, who I hung around with, who were abused as well, so we would always be telling each other what was going on in our homes. But the thing is as an adult, I was very selective on who I told, because whether you can trust people or not, just to just to want to remain friends is another issue. Once they find out about your past, some people can't handle it, and they start to feel like, oh, here's somebody who needs too much work. Here's somebody who's going to be too clingy. They might be asking too much of me as a friend, and then I won't be able to handle it. So I lost some friends by telling people. So I sort of stopped telling people if I was having a hard time, and they, even if they would ask questions about my family, sometimes I would just not say anything because I just didn't want to get into it. So we can get help. We have to learn that we can get help, and we have to become our own parent, our own loving parent. I think that's awesome as far as self-nurturing. There's some great coping lists on the Child Abuse Survivor Monument, and they do talk a lot about self-nurturing, and that's like becoming your own loving parent, the parent that you needed to have. If it was a parent who was the abuser, and you didn't grow up with any kind of loving bond or nurturing care, we really have to learn how to do that as adults, right? How to nurture and care for ourselves and for that little person that was inside of us that was not loved and that was not cared for. And so I started doing a lot of self-help 3 years ago, and I really started working through some of this stuff and actually reached out to my inner child, and I thought, you deserve so much better. And as I was telling myself this stuff, I started to feel better because I realized that little person inside of me was so hurt, and that was not her fault. None of that was, abuse is not the child's fault, right? Never. It's always the abuser's fault. So they choose to abuse, right? They don't have to abuse, they just choose to abuse. And that's why children are not at fault. They can't take the responsibility for that. And of course, sadly, as adult survivors, quite often adult survivors of child abuse will take that blame on and say, well, if I would have been a better child, or if I wasn't so bad, or all the stuff that their abuser told them when they were little starts to come back into their thought patterns, and pretty soon, before you know it, they're taking on the guilt again. And that's not right. Child abuse is wrong of any kind. I don't care what kind it is. It's all incredibly wrong. Children do not be born onto the planet just to be abused, that is absolutely ridiculous for anyone to think that. And children deserve every opportunity to grow up in a healthy environment, and be loved and nurtured and cared for. And parents should provide that to the best of their abilities. We're not talking about being rich and having every kind of a toy as a child. Children just really want to know that they're loved and wanted within the family, accepted for who they are, and loved, right? But when you don't get that, later on, you have to do that for yourself. You have to basically become that parent that you didn't have and work yourself through this stuff, you know what I mean? And with the help of someone else is very, very helpful. Not to be on your own, all the time trying to do this stuff. So I'm just glad I finally reached out, you know what I mean? That's why I keep saying to people, just keep reaching out. It's so important. It says, work to establish harmony with your family or the people you live with. Plan fun and interesting activities with them. Listen to them without being critical. This is something else that they talk about. A lot of times we don't have family members, real family, that we can talk to. And, if you grew up in an abusive home, that's quite often the case. Dysfunctional families, just because people get older doesn't mean that the dysfunction is still not there, unless that family actually got some help and learned how to heal and grew together, as a family in a healing stage. Chances are that's not the case. And most often it's not the case, because so many family members and abusers will not get help because they don't feel that what they're doing is wrong, especially if they have mental issues or, psychological issues that they don't see themselves, they never get diagnosed, or they just don't get that help, right? And also substance abuse problems, a huge issue. A lot of times people think, oh, I don't have a problem, but they do, whether it's alcohol, drugs and whatnot, right? It's just horrible. And quite often they will not admit that they have a problem, right? So they won't get help for it. You have to, these people have to admit that they have a problem before they're ever going to be able to do anything about it, right? And so, we don't often have family that we can just establish a great harmony with. But if we did, like my family's dysfunctional, but there's only a few of us left, and we are still, as far as I'm concerned, dysfunctional. No one's abusing each other, for sure. We all love each other. There's only a few of us left. But the thing is that we don't ever talk about the past, because it's not something that any of us will be able to do with a without rage coming into play or somebody getting angry and saying something that they don't want to. So basically we just, sort of try to just move past it. And so, there's no way to connect on that level, even though we all know what went on in that home. It's quite bizarre. My dad is borderline schizophrenic, and he was diagnosed many years ago. He's got a lot of issues. He doesn't even know what he did. He used to try to run down the freeway and kill himself or commit suicide in the middle of the night, and he has no recollection of that. The way that he treated his wife, he cannot remember that. Like, he was so out of his head for so many years that he does not remember all that stuff. And I don't know if it's whether it's just conveniently that he doesn't remember. Maybe he has he's obviously got, schizophrenia, maybe some split personalities. I sort of see that in him. Certain days he behaves one way, another day he behaves another. Who knows what's going on in his head, right? He's never ever got any help for it. It's unfortunate. He should have. My mom was manic depressive, so I had one, suicidal tendencies with her, very manic depressive, and just always talking about killing herself or killing us or killing my dad, killing everybody. My dad was always talking about killing the whole family. So that's why I wrote my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption, because death was just something that we grew up hearing all of our lives. I'll kill you, or I should kill you, or I could have killed you, was something that I heard on a regular basis growing up. My mom especially talking to me, directed right at me. So I always felt dead. I felt very much dead because she was always talking about killing me. And then she would talk about killing herself. And of course the family, we really loved our mom, and we didn't want to see her suffer, right? But she never would reach out and get any help. She was abused as a child as well, and then did not know how to cope. It was in a domestic violence situation with a husband who did not love her and treated her extremely bad. My dad was just horrible. So that's the issue. She went from one abusive situation to another, never knew a day of peace in her life, and really took it out on the family because she was so angry about the whole thing. Later on, as she got older, she started to mellow out, and especially around in her 60s, but the whole underlying issue was still there because she would still say things that were so hurtful that she was very honest about. I would get her honest feedback on how she felt about the family and how she felt about her life. And she was very honest. And she said that she did not want any of us and that we were not wanted. She hated us because she hated our dad, and that she wanted just to have a good life and never was able to have it. So she basically put the blame on us and on my dad, and instead of where it really belonged, which was her mother. And so the whole issue is we paid the price for that. That's sad but true, and there's no real way to get it back. So we had to learn how to heal from that, right? So family, is not always a place where we can harmonize with and whatnot, but it's a good idea to have friends in your life, who incorporate some good people in your life. That's what I say, and that's what I've done. I just don't allow abusers to hang around with me. Anyone who thinks that they're going to be abusive and treat me in any disrespectful way is out of my life within 2 seconds. I just have no place for that in my life now as an adult, and I would hope that, if you're a survivor of child abuse, that an adult survivor, that you would make those choices for yourself. Sit down and clearly think about who in your life is keeping you back and holding you back from moving forward on your healing journey. Spend more time with people who are positive and people who actually care. Not people who are so positive that they just often can't really help you because they're just not able to be there for you. But I'm talking people who are positive thinkers who want you to heal and move forward. Those are the people you want to spend your time with. If you haven't found any, then you got to make some of those friends. They're out there. And so, it's a good idea to have a good friend to talk to, someone that you can do stuff with, and even if it's just online, you can still chat. If you're having a hard day, you can tell them, and these would be the type of people that wouldn't just say, "Oh, I'm too busy, I don't have time to talk to you." These would be, and if they were busy, they'd say, "You know what? Oh man, I do care. I'm just on my way out the door. Can we connect later on?" We're talking somebody who really cares. Not somebody who just says they care. I've had those types of people in my life too, but they're all gone now. So I don't let people hang around with me who are just going to drag me down or just cause me to feel worse about myself. So that's the whole issue. You need to have people in your life who are good people And they are out there. They're I'm telling you, I've met a lot of them. So that's why it's so important to have some support in your life, right? And here's the next part of this article. It says, work on learning to communicate with others so that they can easily understand what you mean. When talking with another person about your feelings, use I statements like, I feel sad, or I feel upset, rather than accusing the other person. It says, you may want to practice good communication with a friend. Ask your friend to give you feedback on how you can be more easily understood. And that's quite interesting. Communication is a huge issue, especially if you've survived child abuse. There's not quite often the communication in an abusive home would be abuse. That's the communication, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional. That's the communication. So that's the whole issue. We have to really learn how to talk things out with people, and I really had to do a lot of work on that. Let me tell you, over the years, my 20s and 30s, really just to learn how to handle confrontation, and I'm still working on that myself. I have a little bit of problem with boundaries and whatnot, and I definitely have some things I'm still working on. And but that's the whole issue. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and eventually, if you ask yourself the questions and you look for the answers, you can generally, learn how to sort of move forward on these things and practice them so that you get to understand how it actually works, and then incorporate it into your life. So that's so important, right? If when you grow up abused, right? There was really probably no communication, right? No normal communication. So that's why it's a good idea to go, check out some of this stuff on different websites as far as boundaries and feelings, like how to learn how to let people know how you're feeling. You know what I mean? And to be honest with people, open, honest communication, and not hold things in if something's bothering you, because then it tends to build into a rage. That was me. I just let everything, because we were not allowed to show any emotion as children. So, if something was going on in the home, and then my parents were abusing us, then we were not allowed to show any kind of response to it, because the minute we did, then my parents would use that as an excuse to continue to abuse us. So you know how that is, right? A parent says, "Oh, take that look off your face," after they've beaten you, and then you have to try to pull yourself together and put a smile on your face after they beat you. And then if you can't manage a smile because you're still crying, you get another beating, right? And that's the problem with that. So we're conditioned really to not allow ourselves to show emotions or be able to show how we're feeling, right? And as a young teenager, that all changed, because the minute I hit 16 years old, I became outraged, and I started to, it came out in the form of heavy-duty drug use, and also a really sort of violent attitude that I took on to push back at the world, you know what I mean, and push back at my family and say, look what you've done to me. And so that the person started to rage, and with my little small inner child was raging, and I never really did learn how to communicate with people properly, and it affected my relationships later on in life with my partners, and it affected my relationship with my partner that I'm with right now when I was just like 31. So this is about 15 years ago, but 15 years ago. So right around 30 years old. So I was still having problems, and it's only been kind of the last maybe 8 years or so, or maybe even 9 years, that I've actually made any real progress on my communication skills, right? And even now that I've gone through a lot of my healing journey in the last 3 years, I've really made some progress. So that's why I say it's very important to get the help, right? So we'll continue on with this. There's quite a bit more to it. We'll be able to finish this up next week. And I've got a guest coming on the show, Kate Swift, and from thistangledweb.co.uk. She's a survivor, and she's an artist, and she does so much. You have to check her website out regarding child sexual abuse. She's helping so many people around the world, not only in the UK, but everywhere. Anyone who gets a hold of her stuff. I am going to talk about her book and also her website tonight on my show, and we're going to have a show on this coming Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. here my time, Mountain Standard Time, with Kate Swift from the UK. She's a survivor, and she's my friend, and she's a very awesome lady. She's an artist, and she's got a great website. So I'm going to go into more detail this evening on my show tonight, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll be on. I'll be, passing the links around to everybody for our show for Monday, this coming Monday. So have a great day, everybody. Remember to keep reaching out. Make sure that you do reach out and get some help, and don't suffer in silence, right? That is so unfortunate and sad. We do deserve to have a good life. We do deserve to heal and feel good about ourselves. We do count. We do matter. So keep that hope alive, right? And tonight, 9:30 p.m., my show, Child Abuse Prevention, Human Rights Abuse Prevention, will be on, as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I'll be on with Donna Shear tonight, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And that's at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be on for an hour or maybe two. So I'm going to move my show to a little bit later, just in case we go 2 hours. So have a great day, everybody, and take care of yourselves. And I hope it's the start of a wonderful weekend. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.